There's no bullets in it. Okay, it's empty. Yep, just looked at it. It's an antique. Because it's for sale. $1,695. You guys turn your phones off? My name is Marvelous Marv Rotenberg. You can call me Marvelous if you want. This is my 90th birthday. I was born on January 3rd, 1933, in St. Louis, Missouri, in a very poor part of town, close to what we call Wellston. We lived in a 4-family flat. My mother, my father, and my brother, and I, approximately 800 to 900 square feet. We were poor mainly because even though my father made a good living, half of his salary had to be sent to Russia to take care of his mother and father and 8 brothers and sisters. Because he was the oldest son, it was his job to provide for the family. And he left Russia after the Cossacks caught him trying to sell some apples to make money for the family. They beat him practically to death, and the family got together what would be equivalent to $120 and put him on a ship. He came to New York, got on a train. He had $5 left in his pocket when he got to St. Louis, and he was met by his sister and her husband. My parents didn't have enough money to buy clothes for me. We used clothes from my older brother, Eugene, who was 5 years older than me. I did receive shoes. Whenever my feet got too big, I got to buy a brand new pair of shoes, which was a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Growing up, you did not have a lot of money. Your dad came over from Russia, from New York, took a train to St. Louis where his sister was. Why was his sister here? What led her to be here?
They sent her sister here years earlier to try to get a job and earn money to send half of it back to the family. And the sister fell in love and married a wonderful guy, and they had 4 children, and they had a little grocery store. He started off with a horse and buggy selling vegetables that he bought at the riverfront. Downtown St. Louis has a farmer's market that you could go to at 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning and buy wholesale vegetables. He would buy them, he'd put it on his cart with his horse and drive through the neighborhood and sell the fruit and vegetables, and earned enough money after about 6 or 7 years to actually open up a very small, I'd say it was approximately 1,800 square foot grocery store in downtown St. Louis. And there was living quarters above the grocery store for the sister and her husband and their 3 children. And Dad got to sleep on a cot in the grocery store in the back room, which was a big deal for Dad because in Russia, they slept on the ground on straw with a blanket over the straw and a blanket on them. So
when he came here, he immediately went to that grocery store?
He immediately went to the grocery store, and they began teaching him to speak English.
What did he do after that? How did he make a living? What did he do next?
Within 1 year, he was able to speak enough English that he got a job on Washington Avenue in what was called the Garment District. He went to work for a guy that had a 4-story building, and he would go to New York about 6 times a year and buy closeout clothing. And he'd bring it back by truck or by train and put it in his wholesale clothing store. Back in those days, it wasn't like it is today, where a merchant, where you wanted to buy some jeans, you'd send an email to Levi's with what jeans you wanted, and they'd pack them up and ship them to you, and you send them a check. It didn't work like that in those days. Little stores could not buy directly from factories. They could only buy from wholesalers, like the one that Dad worked for.
So he was doing that when you were,
When I was a little kid, Dad was working there. He worked there until they sold the store. And just prior to selling the store, Dad had been there for about, I'd say, 10 to 12 years. And we got a telephone call from Russia. A cousin in the next town over, they lived in a town called Belarutka, and the Nazis got to Belarutka. They lined up all the Jews in town. There were about 150 of them, lined them up against the river and shot them all through the head and threw them into the river. And Dad got a call. It was the first time that I ever saw Dad. When I came home from lunch from school, Dad was in bed crying, and when I asked Mom, she told me the story. And we realized that at that point we lost his whole family, and it was just a horrible thing for my dad to accept that this happened.
Since we've known you, I think we've always seen you be very equipped. You've always, you've had guns. You've been ready to defend yourself and defend your family, and that's something that has always seemed very close to who you are and the things that you care about. How did that, like growing up and seeing your dad go through that, like how did that impact you growing up? Like I know you've talked about just that part of who you are and being ready to defend yourself. Like what was that like growing up?
Good question, and perfect timing, because the day that my father got that message, when I went to shop at school, I was making a lamp for my mother, and the lamp consists of a brass tube that you stick the wire through with the wooden lamp around it. When I went to shop that day, I brought a .22 caliber shell that I had found somewhere and put it inside of the brass tube, and it fit perfectly. So I realized if I straightened it out, I had a barrel for a gun, and all I had to do is make a gun out of wood with a rubber band, a big wide rubber band with a nail that I could pull back and let the nail hit the back of the .22 caliber shell and shoot the .22 caliber round.
You were great.
That was my first gun, and I became proficient at shooting it in the neighborhood. And my parents had no idea that I had a gun at that point.
How old were you at this time?
I'd say I was about 9 or 10 years old.
Thinking back to that time when you were 9, why were you doing this? Was it, it probably had to do with obviously the situation with Joe, your father, but how do you think you were feeling when you were building that gun and doing that sort of thing?
I felt that the Jews throughout all of Europe did not have guns. They weren't hunters. They weren't target shooters. And it was very easy for Hitler to have his people round up the Jews and put them in trains and bring them to the detention camps, concentration camps, and gas and kill the Jews. And I said to myself, seeing the movies about Jews getting killed, I said to my parents when they did find the gun and asked me, why do you have this? I said, I hope I never have to, but if someday anybody comes for this Jew or for my family, I'll be able to protect myself. I'll be able to have a gun and protect myself. And I've been protecting myself and my family and my friends for years.
How did they react when you said that? Do you remember?
They were very upset when I told them about the gun and what I was doing, and it was very difficult for them to accept it. And I was not a very good son. I was probably about as wild of a son as you could possibly have.
How so?
I just had a mind of my own. I didn't like taking orders from people. I felt like I was an intelligent person and I could do my own thing, which is something that shouldn't have been that bad for my family, to have to deal with a son that was so wild and did wild and crazy things. I bought my first automobile when I was 16. I'd been working at a produce store, Sansoni Fruit Market, and I'd been working at a service station up at the corner from our house on Terry Avenue. And the guy that I worked for would buy taxi cabs when they were worn out, and he would usually pay about $50 for taxi cabs. And he bought a 36 Chevy 4-door for $50, and I told him that I would love to have it. And he told me that he'll sell it to me for the $50 that he paid for it. And we fixed it up, and he taught me how to drive. It took about an hour, and I pulled up in front of my house with the 36 Chevy and told my parents that we now have an automobile. Up until that point, we had no automobile.
What has always made you so fascinated with vehicles, whether it be cars, boats, planes? I know that you've had a look like some time with that. Like, fixing that engine with that friend for $50, was that the first time that you really fell in love with the vehicle?
I was in love with fast girls and fast cars. My 36 Chevy wasn't a very fast car, but there were many cars following that that they got a little faster as I grew up and made more money. And as far as the fast women part of it, I'm really not proud of the fact that at such an early age, I was engaged with women. I didn't want my son Greg to be with women when he was as young as I was, but it happened, and it's in my past, and I can't change it. I just was in love with girls. I just love girls, and I spent too much of my lifetime thinking about girls instead of concentrating on making a living and doing other things I should have been doing. Making love to girls, I was too young. But it happened, and I can't change it.
Yeah. What would you say to yourself now, looking back? What would you tell Marvin at that age when he was a young guy? What would you say to him?
I'd say just keep it in your pocket until you're old enough to really understand what you're doing and what the consequences could be.
When did you realize that it was actually a bigger deal than you might have thought, like engaging with women in that way? When did you realize, like, hey, this thing is actually maybe more heavy or more, meaningful or impactful than I might have thought?
I'm not sure when I realized that I was doing the wrong thing, because like everybody else in the world, whatever you do and I do, we do it because we think we're doing the right thing.
You talked a little bit about your dad, how he came here. We haven't heard much about your mom or your brother. What else about your family, your immediate family, would be helpful to talk about that stands out to you when you look back?
My brother was 5 years older than me, and we were total, complete opposites. In fact, if you see pictures of my brother, you won't believe that we came from the same mother and father, because we just don't look anything close to one another. Just between you and me, don't tell anybody, but he looks more like our milkman. But I think my mom was a wonderful woman, and I don't think she messed around with the milkman. Eugene was total opposite of me. He would come home from school every day and do his homework. I would come home from school, throw my books on the bed, and tell my mom I'm leaving and don't know when I'm coming back. And I'd get in at whatever time I wanted to. My parents didn't like me coming in so awfully late. I tried to be very quiet. When I came in the back door, they were sleeping up towards the front of the house, so I could sneak in the house. And a lot of times they had no idea what time I was out till.
Because he was so different, did that make you not as close to him? Like, did you feel like you both had a very strong relationship? I know as he moved to Chicago eventually, you weren't as close, but did you admire him? Did you look up to him? What do you remember about your relationship with him?
He was a really great guy. He found a woman that loved him, and he loved her, and they got married and had 3 children. Unfortunately, they were all girls, so the only one we had to carry on the Rotenberg name was my son Greg. But Eugene was the kind of guy that he would cut off his arm. If you asked him for a hand, he'd cut off his arm and give it to you. He was just a wonderful, wonderful person. And after my dad died, a few years later when Eugene retired and Sandra retired, they all moved to Israel and had a terrific life in Israel.
You talking a lot about your dad and Honest Joe. I've heard that throughout my whole life, like the things that he's imparted on you. And what are the things that, I guess, when you think about how your parents have impacted you as a man, what are the key things that stick out in your mind about them?
They were very religious people. My mother's father was the head rabbi of Philadelphia. So you can imagine how religious she was. My father was very religious also. They went to the synagogue for Shabbos and for all the holy days. They would ask Eugene and I to go. I went to Hebrew school when I was about 9 until I was 13 and learned to read the Torah and to speak some Hebrew, which we had to use when I bar mitzvahed when I was 13. And by the way, on my bar mitzvah, I got drunk for the first time in my life, and it was just horrible. I'll never forget it. I was laying in bed, and the ceiling started spinning, and I got up and ran to the bathroom, stuck my head in the toilet, and my mother ran in and heard me coughing and throwing up, and she said, "Let me hold your head, son." And I said, "Mom, I'm 13 now, I'm a man, and I'm gonna hold my own head and throw up without you. Thank you very much." And that was the last time I was drunk in my whole life.
The last time?
The last time I was drunk when I was 13. Just looked at God and I said, "God, thank you for letting me survive this. I'll never get drunk again, I promise you. I don't want to go through this again."
Yeah.
And I never did. And believe me, I was in many situations, especially when I was in the Army. I was in many situations where everybody around me was drunk, and I was the sober guy that could take everybody home and make sure that everyone was safe. I was working at a food center store when I was going to high school. They had a program that you could go to work, you could leave high school early at about 1:30, and I would drive over to the food center store on to Bolivar. And I worked my way up to being the produce night manager of the produce department. Rosalie came in one day, and I thought, what a gorgeous woman. I have to meet her. And I think she either wanted like a cantaloupe or a watermelon or something where I could approach her and say to her, "Let me show you how to buy this cantaloupe or watermelon," and began talking to her. And one thing led to another, and we started dating and fell in love, and we were engaged to be married before I went into the Army.
What attracted you to Rosalie? What made you want to propose to her when you were that age?
Well, Rosalie was a beautiful woman, and she still is, by the way. And she had a big heart. She was honest, reliable, brave, clean, and reverent. I mean, she was everything that you would want in a wife. And we fell in love and planned on getting married when I got out of the Army. I was, I think, 19, and I got the draft notice, went downtown.
What was that when you got the draft notice?
I was very upset. I was selling shoes at Famous and Bar, Southtown, and I was having a ball. I was making money. I was engaged to Rosalie. Felt like my life was getting torn apart by having to report to the Army, where I couldn't be my own guy. I couldn't do my thing. I'd have to do what other people told me to do, and I was devastated. But I had no choice. I went into the Army, and I had a lot of good experiences in the Army as far as learning to take orders from people and do things that I necessarily didn't want to do because I was my own guy. Up until that point, I just did whatever I wanted to do. And now I belong to someone else. I belong to Uncle Sam. And I was at the mercy of the sergeants and commanding officers in the Army.
Was that difficult for you?
I just said to myself, Marv, this is it. You're in the Army now, and you've got to do whatever they want you to do, and you're going to give them 2 years of your life. And since your father always taught you, whatever job you do, be the best at it, I decided that I tried to be a good soldier and follow orders and do whatever I was told to do, and make my life as pleasant and as happy as I could. They sent me to Germany. I was a cook in Germany, and we had a huge kitchen. We fed about 600 to 700 soldiers. We were in a medical battalion, so besides being a cook, we were also taught things that a medic would do. But I think I was a good cook, and I could have been a corporal or a sergeant, but they told me that I had to get a haircut. And I knew that there were Army rules that said that if you're stationed overseas, you don't have to have a crew cut. And I looked terrible in a crew cut because of this big nose. I had a pompadour of hair. It used to be here. It's receding, but I had this great pompadour that made my nose look smaller because you'd look at my beautiful hair. I never got the haircut. I kept my long hair, and I stayed a private in the 2 years that I served in Germany. There were 8 people in my battalion that I actually went to high school with. It was unusual that I reported to Fort Leonard Wood and walked into my barracks, and here were 8 guys that I knew that I went to school with, plus a bunch of other people that from every race and religion, but I had my friends there to go through basic training, which was great. And we all went to cook school. They sent us all to Germany, but I don't know if everyone understands this, but back in those days, we had many, many bases in Germany. So none of these people actually went with me to the little town of Hanau that I was stationed in. They went to different barracks in different parts of Germany. It was, being a cook was a lot of fun, and I had a wonderful friendship that I made at being a cook, and his name is Ralph Dioria, and he came from Italy. He actually was smuggled over from Italy in the hold of a transport boat and arrived in New Jersey without a passport, and confided in me and said to me one night over a few drinks, Marvin, I don't know how to say this, but I'm not a citizen of the United States. And I said, how could you be in the Army if you're not a citizen? He said, I just had phony papers that I had people make up for me, and they drafted me, and here I am. So I immediately went to our captain and told him the story about Ralph, and the captain and I wrote a letter to their congressman that represents his area where he lived in New Jersey, and we got him his citizenship. And Ralph and I are still friends. He's living in Fort Lauderdale, Florida with his wife and children, and we talk to each other on the phone quite often. And we've been on vacation with him and his wife, and they're just lovely, wonderful people.
When you told the captain that he was actually not a citizen, was he mad at you about that?
No, he was shocked. He was in shock, and Ralph was scared to death that they'd do something to him. But the captain, it just so happened that the captain was Jewish and I'm Jewish, and there was only one other Jewish guy in our battalion. So the captain invited me to his house for one of the Jewish holidays, and we became buddies. Not good enough buddies for him to make me a corporal or a sergeant, because he believed I should get the haircut. But we became buddies, and he was extremely nice to Ralph, and together we got his citizenship for him. When I got out of the Army, at that point, my dream was to have a service station, because I love fast cars, and I wanted a service station where I could work on my car and I could work on other people's cars. And because I served 2 years, they sent me to a trade school called Rankin Technical School here in St. Louis, and they taught me tune-up and engine rebuilding. I already knew tune-up because I had already worked in a service station and did a lot of tune-ups, but taught me other things about the engine and other parts of the car, and gave me enough knowledge that I borrowed $2,000 from my father and opened up Marv's Mobile Service on Owl Street Road and 81st Street, right next to a Steak and Shake, and ran Marv's Mobile Service for about 4 years until one day my brother came by the store and said to me, Marv, would you like for me to tell you how you're doing financially? And I said, I'm probably doing okay. I said, I've got money in the register, and I'm okay, I think. He said, let me do your books. I said, go ahead. By the way, Eugene not only was a book salesman, but he was a graduate accountant. So he did my books, and he walked into the service area where I was giving a car a grease job and oil change. And he said, when you're finished, come in. And I walked in, and he said, guess what? I said, what? He said, you're bankrupt. I said, what do you mean I'm bankrupt? He said, when you took over the station, you had 6 huge underground reservoirs, metal reservoirs, that each held thousands of gallons of gas. And he said they were full when you took over the service station. He said you now have 80% of the gas is gone. You've only got 20% left, and you're a terrible businessman. And I want you to call up the people that own the gas station and tell them to please come by, that you're packing up your stuff and your tools and your truck and you're leaving, and give them back the keys to the station. And that's what I did. And a week later, I had a job somewhere else.
You told me at one point you hired some of your friends or possible people you've met. If you mind telling us more about that, or how many total?
Well, my friends were about as wild and crazy as I was. And at that point, 2 or 3 of them were out of jobs, and I needed help at the service station. So I hired my friends to come to work for me at the service station. And I really wasn't a good boss. I let them get by with bloody murder when they weren't. Back in those days, when you pulled your car up, we would immediately approach your window and greet you and ask you if we can fill up your tank. And while we're putting gas in your car, we're checking your tires, we're checking your fan belt, we're checking parts of your engine, we're checking your oil to make sure the oil's okay. And of course, that's the way you get business in the service station. The oil was always dirty and needed to be changed. The filter always needed to be changed. The air filter and the oil filter were always dirty, and your belts looked like they were about to fall off, so you're gonna need belts. And your tires weren't looking too good, and we could sell you a new set of tires. So that's the way we did it back in those days. Unfortunately, my friends took advantage of me and took a lot of free gas for themselves, took home some of my tools, and spent a lot of time when they should have been working on other things, working on their own cars. So I was too nice of a guy. I was a terrible businessman, and I paid the price for it.
So that was your first business.
Yes.
What made you approach? So when you approached your dad originally for that $2,000 loan, which was probably at that time a really significant amount of money, that wasn't nothing. What made you want to start something on your own versus going to work for another person like you were before?
I always wanted to have a shop and to have a fast car and to race cars. And while I was at my service station, I joined 3 sports car clubs, and I won a lot of races. I had one of the fastest cars at the drag strip. Back in those days, I could do 0 to 60 in 6 seconds. Of course, today, with a Tesla, you can do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. But back in those days, it was a big deal. So I loved fast cars, and I had one of the fastest cars you could have. I was so fortunate to be able to do all these things.
What was it like to drag race? I don't know much about that part of your life. Was that the first time? I know you've raced boats and things like that. Was that the first time that you've raced vehicles?
A drag race is when you go to a drag strip, and these were in Illinois, and you would race against other cars, and the person that could do a quarter of a mile the fastest would be the winner of the race. And if you won, then you would race the next person that thought that they could beat you. And then after you beat that person, you'd race the next person. And when you're finished at the very end, if you were what was called the top eliminator, they would give you a trophy, and I would take home trophies from having the fastest car. I was so active in sports car clubs that whenever there were sports car events, I would enter with my car, and the same car that was that fast, I was able to win a contest, a fuel economy contest with the same Corvette by shutting off 2 of the carburetors, just using the middle of the 3rd carburetor and changing the air in tires and doing a bunch of tricks, I was able to get in my class more gas mileage than all the other cars in my class. So I was a car nut, and I was just busy doing all these things and having a ball. I taught my father, my mother, and my brother how to drive on my 36 Chevy, and my dad bought a brand new 4-door Pontiac and taught him and my mom and my brother to drive that. And we were just like the rest of the people in the neighborhood with a brand new, wonderful car. My firstborn, Shelley, was a very difficult delivery for Rosalie. And by the time she entered the world, Rosalie and I were exhausted, but happy to have her. She was a beautiful baby, and she's a beautiful 60-plus-year-old woman today. I love her very much. She's a wonderful writer. She also teaches writing at Barnard University in New York. She lives in New York with her husband, Carmi. They have 3 children. Zach, who has a wife and 2 little girls. Aniel, who just became a full-fledged psychiatrist. And Micah. Micah is a fabulous young man. Micah enjoyed cooking and baking when he was a little boy. When he was 16 years old, he made pies, and he went around to all of his neighbors and took orders and baked pies for them. When he grew up, he got a wonderful education at a wonderful university and graduated with honors and decided that he would like to become a chef. He went to work for the owner of the largest and biggest restaurants in New York City and became a world-renowned chef, cooked meals at private homes for movie stars, just has done wonderful things. And now he's operating a business that he started with a friend, and they're making frozen meals that they're selling in New York and 3 other states surrounding New York. And hopefully in the next few years, we'll get a chance to get frozen meals from him here in St. Louis. And I have a daughter named Leslie. Leslie was not a really good girl when it came to taking orders from her dad. She was like her dad. She had a mind of her own, and she was really hard to deal with. But guess what? Leslie ended up being one of the biggest stars of our family. She went to work for a company called the Discovery Channel, and she helped put together a program that you're all familiar with called the Animal Planet. And she did the Animal Planet for many years, and the person that was in charge of PBS found out how terrific she was and began talking to Leslie, and eventually got Leslie to leave the Discovery Channel and come to work at PBS. Leslie became the director of all children's programs and had 150 people throughout the United States under her. She's won 5 Emmys, and she's married to a wonderful guy named Brian, who's a heart doctor, and they have 2 beautiful, wonderful daughters that are doing great in life. And I'm so proud of them. And I have a son named Greg, my only son. He's living in California. Greg has been very, very successful in being president of an electrical parts company. He's been up high in several other companies that he's worked for, and he has 2 wonderful boys that we love, and hopefully they're going to be like their dad and be terrific guys and wonderful fathers, and hopefully have sons and daughters that they'll be proud of. I can't say enough about my children, and I haven't even begun to talk about my 3rd child, who is my wife Nancy's daughter, Kathy, who was 8 years old when I married Nancy, and one of my best friends and most wonderful daughters, who lives here in St. Louis. And I get to see her several times a week and sing to her on the telephone because she's my sunshine. You know that song, don't you?
I do.
Would you like for me to sing it for you?
Sure.
You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. So please don't take my Tinkerbell away. Good morning, sunshine. She calls me at about 25 after 8 on her way to work. She's a teacher and at a Ladue school here in St. Louis, and one of the most wonderful daughters you could possibly have. She also is a mother to 3 of my most wonderful grandsons.
What would you say to a new father, or lessons from fatherhood, being a father of 3 of your own and Kathy?
There's not enough time today, or not enough time in my life, for me to tell you about being a father. It's a wonderful feeling to have children and to know that from the minute they're born, they are yours to love and to teach and to make them into the best people that they could possibly be. And I love my children, and I'm so happy. God made me happy to have all these wonderful children. I can't say enough about them. Well, after I got back from Germany, I was between jobs, and there was an ad in the newspaper, and McDonnell Douglas here in town ran an ad and said that they needed 20 illustrators for their facility here in St. Louis. And they said, if you enjoy drawing, if you bring some of your drawings and come to our office and meet with us, we'd like to interview you and see if you could be a candidate to become a technical illustrator. It sounded interesting to me. I had a few drawings that I had done in high school. I had a knack for drawing, and I loved to draw. I went down and met with them and took a test, and they accepted me. Out of the 200 people that applied, I was one of the 20 people that they accepted. And for the first time in my life, I went to college. They sent me to Washington University for 3 months, 8 hours a day, from 8 in the morning till about 5 in the afternoon. And I became a technical illustrator for McDonnell Douglas. Illustrating was a lot of fun, probably for about the first 6 months. And sitting behind a drawing board, drawing pages to accompany the F-15 aircraft that we were making at the time was fun, but after a while it became boring to me because I realized that I wasn't a guy just to sit there and draw all day. I was a guy that wanted to talk to people and have fun and laugh and joke. And I love jokes. I love to tell jokes. I think God sent me here. Thank you, God. One of the things he sent me for was to tell jokes. And those of you that know me know that they're not always great jokes, but I try my best. And I really enjoy making people laugh. I got bored telling jokes and sitting at the desk, and decided that I wanted to move on from there. I was working at McDonnell Douglas during the day, and I'd come home and Rosalie would make me a nice dinner. I'd have dinner, and then I'd go to work at Famous and Bar Clayton selling ladies' shoes. Had a great time. I love selling shoes.
Did you think that that was going to be your career? Like you were going to work at McDonnell Douglas and rise the ranks of that organization and do that, or did you not know?
I was open to try anything. In my early days, I had jobs. I tried being a butcher. I only lasted about 3 months because a beginning butcher, all you got to do was cut up chickens. And I soon got tired of cutting up chickens and left becoming a butcher. I had a job at a discount store called GEM, where I managed sporting goods, toys, and luggage department. And it was a great job, but I had a problem with the management of the company. They were in Kansas City, and they sold, in the gem store in Kansas City, they sold a lot of golf supplies. And they kept sending me golf supplies, and I kept calling them practically every day and telling them that we don't sell golf in St. Louis, we sell fishing tackle, and we sell hunting supplies. And I just couldn't get them to change their mind, and I just kept complaining about it till eventually they fired me because I was just a pain in the butt to them. Even though I was the second best store in their chain.
How do you balance that when you disagree with maybe when the authority above you is doing something you disagree with?
It's always been difficult for me to take orders from people, especially people that weren't, I'll use words like very bright people. It's like when you're going to school and they're teaching you things that you feel like you already know. I was a terrible student in grade school, and in high school, my friends and I were so busy chasing girls that we didn't have time to go to school. When it came time to graduate, they refused to let me graduate. They told me they couldn't let me graduate because I'd missed so much school. When I told this to my mother said, "You have to graduate, and I'm going to go and talk to him." So she got on the Goodfellow bus and went to Del Mar, a 20-minute ride, and then 20 minutes ride on the Del Mar streetcar, and then walked for 15 minutes and went to Soldan High School, went to the principal's office and sat down to the principal and convinced the principal to let me graduate. And thank God that she did it so that I could graduate with the rest of my class.
Sounds like your mom was pretty persuasive. She was pretty sharp. Was she always that way?
Yes.
She was stubborn and she got what she wanted, like you?
Yes.
Is that where you got that from?
Yes. Very, very smart, very pretty, very religious, very righteous. When you do a job, do it better than anybody else. Good work habits, good, just all around wonderful mama and papa. I was so lucky to have them.
Yeah. How did you become an employee working for a huge company like McDonnell Douglas to eventually running your own huge enterprise in St. Louis?
When I was fired from the GEM store, one of the salesmen represents a fishing tackle company that became a good friend of mine, went to Grandpa Pigeon, was a discount store in St. Louis before we had discount stores. He was before Venture, before Target, before Kmart. It was just a one-store operation, and it was famous in St. Louis. If you wanted to get a good deal on something, you'd go to Grandpa Pigeon's discount store.
Was it a grocery store or what did they sell?
It was not a grocery store. It was a discount store. They had everything from hardware to paint to clothing to shoes. Just like you'd walk into a store like a Walmart without the groceries.
Gotcha. And how did you end up working for them?
One of the salespeople that called on me called up a guy. His name is Jack Holly. Jack Holly married Grandpa Pigeon's only daughter. Her name was Barbara. Jack worked for Grandpa Pigeon's for 12 years and saved his money. He didn't have to. He could have simply asked his wife, who was a multimillionaire, for the money, but he saved his own money to open up his own grandpa store. He approached Grandpa and asked him if he could open up a store in Collinsville, Illinois, which was far enough away from the store in St. Louis that it wouldn't affect Grandpa's business. Grandpa gave him permission to do it. Jack went to Illinois and bought a piece of land that had a small building on it and built a 30,000 square foot discount store. I went to work for Jack after I left GEM as the hard goods buyer. Jack was a terrific merchandise person. He had a photographic memory, and even though I had a lot of experience with GEM, Jack taught me a lot of things, and he allowed me to become a buyer, and as the main buyer for all the hard goods in the store, I became what people said to me over the years was probably one of the best buyers in town. Jack Holly said to me many times, "Marv, you are by far the best buyer I've ever worked with in my life." We had a wonderful relationship. He invited me to fly his airplane. He introduced me to boat racing. He had me go to Joplin and open up a Grandpa store there, and then go to West County and open up a Grandpa store there. And this was my college education, working for Grandpas. Eventually, Grandpa retired, and Grandpa was a big drinker, and Jack Holly was a big drinker. As good as he was at merchandising, the drinking was very much a detriment to his life. He was separated from his wife and 4 sons, and I did everything humanly possible to get Jack to get away from. Not only did he like to drink late at night, he used to drink in nightclubs, black nightclubs, and he played the trumpet. So they would invite him to play with the bands in these nightclubs, and he would drink and play the trumpet. And I would come in to open the store at 8 o'clock in the morning, and he would be sleeping at his desk.
So you admired him in some ways?
In some ways, I admired him immensely. In other ways, I felt bad for him, and I eventually was instrumental in getting him back together with his wife and children. I felt really good to have accomplished that.
Yeah. What do you think made you such a good buyer? Or what was it about you that caused you to be so good at it?
Well, when my parents taught me, if you do a job, do it better than anyone else. All through my life, I've done that. Whatever job I took, I tried to be the best at it. And I wanted to be the best buyer when he made me a buyer. And I felt that I accomplished that. I worked for him for 9.5 years. And I only left because I had an opportunity to become a partner in a bargain barn that an outside person had come to me. He was actually a salesman that called on me, and he approached me and asked me to become his partner in opening up a bargain barn about 20 miles from the store that I was working at in Edwardsville, Illinois, in a roller skating rink. And we were planning on doing that. And unfortunately, Jack found out that this was going to happen. He called me into his office and he fired me on the spot. And he said, I want you to take a box and put your things in it and go home. And he said, I am going to pay you everything I owe you. I'm going to give you the Christmas bonus that you would have earned. And I wish you all the good luck in the world, but you're either 110% for me or you're against me. And once you've decided to open up your own store, you became against me. I had many millions of dollars of merchandise on order and other orders ready to place for many millions of dollars of merchandise. And I begged him to just give me a couple of days. I asked for a week and he said no. I asked for a couple of days, then I asked for 1 day just to finish the job so that I wouldn't be leaving him with all these undone things going into Christmas. He insisted that I leave immediately, and it's a shame, but that's the way it worked out. And I left, and of course, it became the best thing that ever happened to me.
Why do you say that?
Because if I would have stayed with him, I wouldn't have gotten the chance to go into business for myself.
So what attracted you then when that bargain barn partner came to you? What made you attracted to go into business for yourself? I'd imagine that you were doing well. You had a great relationship with Jack. You worked with him for 9 years. What made you excited enough to go do your own thing?
Well, I always felt that when people gave me a job to do and left me alone and didn't be looking over my shoulder and second guessing me, I always did my best work. And after being fired, I decided to become a manufacturer's rep.
And I think for a lot of people that work for other people, there's always that desire to do something on your own and to own something yourself, to be a partner. Was that something that was, when you were working for Jack, was that a desire that you had for a long time? So
yes.
Because I know you ran companies before this. Did you know that was something that you were going to do again? And like, what was so attractive about Bargain Barn to make you leave Jack, I guess? Was it that sense of ownership?
My desire to be wealthy from being a poor kid in a poor neighborhood, that desire burned in me from my first job at Sansoni Fruit Market till it still burns in me today. And I'm a very successful business person. But I always, whatever I do, I want to do it the best. And I'll work as hard as I have to and do whatever it takes to be the best at whatever I do.
When you think about the root of that feeling of that desire to have wealth and to make money and experiencing, I think for a lot of people that really have that drive, they've experienced what it's like to not have money, and they know what it's like to not have money. Were there things that stick out to you from your childhood, that any memories or things that you look at as like just core things that boy, if we had money in this situation, or seeing, a situation where your parents may have not been able to provide, or does anything stick out to you? Like, where did that desire come from that you still have today when you were a kid?
I think I was just born with the desire to become wealthy, and it was always in my head and in my heart, and I just always felt that I would do whatever it took to become a success and to get the wealth that I could have the things that I desired, a family, a business, a family, car, boat, whatever a person desired. I always had those feelings within me. And when you grow up poor, it's easy to be envious of friends and people that you meet that have all these things and are successful, and to want to do that, and just to know that there's no reason why I can't do what this other person has done. All I need is the chance to do it, and I'll work harder than anybody else, and I'll do it better. And it's just within me. I'm just that kind of a person.
Yeah.
I was at a trade show in Chicago. A friend of mine walked up to me and said, "Marv, I know you're always looking for lines that pay high commission." He said, "I've got a line of blacklight posters." He said, "You probably don't know what a blacklight poster is." And I said, "Yes, I do. I have 3 children, and they have blacklight posters. I know what they are." He said, "I want to introduce you to the guy because he doesn't have a salesman in your area." He introduced me to him, and I became a rep for a poster manufacturer.
For people that listen to this today, unpack what that means, because now we live in a world where you go online and you buy anything you want. You don't have to call someone like Marvin Rotenberg like if you run a store or something, you can just go direct to consumer. So what was the role of being a manufacturer's rep? Like what did that even mean at that time?
I took it to extremes. What I'm going to describe to you is, instead of just walking into a store with catalogs and pictures, I bought a 20-foot travel trailer, and I built a showroom inside of the travel trailer with 8-foot tall, 4-foot wide pegboards on swivels that moved, and I took my samples from the different lines that I represented, and I attached them to the pegboards so that when I went to see a customer, I could bring them out to my motorhome. I could sit them down and offer them a drink. I could offer them a sandwich, and I could show them my products away from their office, away from their telephone. Back in those days, they didn't have cell phones, and they enjoyed that. And I was very successful as a manufacturer's rep in doing that.
What did you learn from that point of your life where you're driving around a lot, you're meeting with people, you're doing deals, I know you've talked about, just being on the road and all the memories of that. What did you learn during that period of time?
It was a very simple process for me, because I decided that I would call on bargain barns, and I would call on bargain barns in Illinois, Missouri, parts of Kansas, parts of Kentucky and Tennessee. And all of these bargain barns knew who Grandpa Pigeons was. In fact, several of the owners of these bargain barns told me that the only reason they're in the bargain barn business is because they went to St. Louis, they saw the grandpa's operation, and they were so impressed with it that they went back to their little town that they came from and started their own bargain barn. And it was so simple for me to simply walk in and say, here I am. And they knew me, they knew of me, that I was the buyer for Grandpa's, and they trusted me. And I could walk into any bargain barn and sell them all of my lines of merchandise. They enjoyed talking to a guy who'd worked at Grandpa's and had done the kind of things that I'd done in my past. And in a lot of cases, I was meaningful to them in helping them do some merchandising in their store. I helped them build displays and do things that they hadn't been doing. In some cases, I would introduce them to products that they hadn't even thought of having, and got them off into buying into new areas. So I helped them as much as they helped me.
And especially in this season of your life where you're shaking hands with people, you're going to these stores, you're meeting with the owners. What advice do you have for people that are selling things? What have you learned throughout your life selling stuff?
Work harder than the next guy. Be honest in every way. Don't take advantage of anyone. Just be your people that you work with are just like you, and just be a good person and help everybody to the best of your ability, and just love them as God loves them, as good people, and you be your best. I was moving into a house, a two-story house with my wife and 3 children, and I was sweating, unpacking boxes. I was wearing a pair of swimming trunks because I was a hairy guy and sweat was rolling off of me. The doorbell rang. I opened up the door, and there was one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen in my life. And she said, "Hi, my name is Nancy, and I'm your neighbor, and I wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood." And she handed me a cake that she had baked. And I looked at her, and I said, "I think I love you." And she said, "You're so funny," and left. And that was my first encounter with Nancy Patterson, my neighbor who lived 2 doors away. We lived in a subdivision that had a swimming pool. And what was interesting is that the neighborhood consisted of a lot of Jewish people and a lot of Catholic people. And at the swimming pool, the Catholic people were on one side of the pool and the Jewish people were on the other side of the pool. Don't ask me why, but back in those days, I guess they felt more comfortable talking to each other. And I would always be staring at this beautiful woman on the other side of the pool. And one day, I swam over and introduced myself and told her I remember her, and we began a conversation.
When you swam over to her on that day, Was your intention to be with her, or was it sort of innocent, or did you know that, I want to pursue this woman?
At that point, I'd been married for 17 years, and this is a very difficult thing for me to say in this camera, but I was not a happy camper. I was no longer madly in love with the woman that I fell in love with many years prior, and I met a woman who also was unhappy, and we decided to meet and have lunch together. And here I am, 48 years later, and we're still having lunch together.
What has she meant to you? Like, I know this is probably a hard question to ask, but why do you think God brought Nancy Patterson to your life?
I don't know what God had in mind when the two of us met, but we saw something in each other that we were missing in our marriages, and one thing led to another, and we fell deeply in love, and we had a terrible life to live, me with my wife and 3 children, and her with her husband and her daughter Kathy, and eventually we decided that we wanted to be together, we wanted to marry each other and be together forever.
Is there anything that not that necessarily you regret, but things that you maybe wish you would correct as you look back on that period of life?
I left a wonderful woman, a fabulous, wonderful woman. I left my 3 children, which I love and adore, and I will to the day I die. And Nancy left a husband that at one time she had loved tremendously. And not only did I get a new wife, but I got a new daughter that I love immensely. I got the line of posters and I started selling them to all of my bargain barn people, and they loved them. And I started adding things to my poster business. I had rented a building in the Delmar Loop, and I took on a friend as a partner in my business, Marvin Green.
How did you meet Norman?
Marvin came to work for us, and he was my inside guy. He would be in the store working with, we had teenagers that were rolling posters in our store, and Norm came up with the idea that we would sell posters to the people in University City. So we'd actually open up the front door of the store and not just come in the front door to work and roll posters, but we'd open it up and sell some of the things that I was representing. And I started adding things to the store, and I built a store that was just a fun thing for people to do. I just didn't want a normal store. In my first store, you walked into the front door, and I built it so that it was a hallway painted black with blacklight posters. You would walk up the steps at the back of the store, and there would be strobe lights and all kinds of psychedelic things on the second floor, just a balcony. To get into the store, I put a sliding board that you'd use for a playground to slide down from the balcony to the first floor, and you would slide down and you would end up in a waterbed. So immediately you were seeing all these posters, all these crazy lights and things, and ending up in a waterbed, which nobody knew what the hell it was. You'd get up from there and walk around the store, and it was just full of whatever teenage people wanted.
You had to slide down the slide into the store into a waterbed.
Yes.
Whose idea was that?
Mine. I wanted it to be a fun experience before you even bought anything. I wanted you to have fun right off the bat.
Wow. On Delmar, on the main
On
street.
the Delmar Loop, right.
So it sounds like the poster business was really...
It was the catalyst to begin the headquarters boutique. When we sold posters to people on the road, they would ask if there were any other items that I represented that they could sell, that could go along with the posters. And I started bringing in a line of iron-ons, a line of bumper stickers, a line of incense burners and incense. And little by little, I introduced the lines that I had in my one retail store to some of my customers on the road. And my biggest customer in town, and probably the reason for my instant success, was, I'm going to tell you a secret. We're not going to let anybody know about this one, okay?
All right.
Here's the deal. I got an appointment with the buyer for the Venture stores. Venture was like a Target and Walmart. I told the guy that my posters would sell better than the 4 racks of posters that he already had in his stores. Now, why did he have 4 racks of posters? Because posters, not only blacklight, but regular colored posters and black and white posters were very popular. And young people and middle-aged people would buy a tremendous amount of posters. Well, what I did was, to be the best poster seller in the country, I went to the shows and I went to all the printers and I said to the printers, I want to buy the best 2 or 3 posters that you have. I don't want to buy complete displays. I only want to buy your best sellers. And they said, well, we've never done anything like that before. And I said, I'm going to go to every printer in the United States and I'm going to buy their best posters to sell the best, and put them all on one rack. And they agreed to sell me, and I brought in posters from many different poster manufacturers and put them all on my rack. I said to the buyer of Venture, I'd like to put my posters, my rack in against yours, and I said, I'll bet you $100 to $1 that I'll sell everybody that you've got. And he said, like, is that a dare? I said, yes, I dare you to try my posters against the other 4 or 5, depending on the size of the store. They had as many as 4 to 5 racks of posters. He let me put them into 2 stores as tests. Well, here's the secret. I called all my friends and relatives and begged them. I gave them money and begged them to go to those 2 venture stores and buy all my posters. Within 30 days, my poster rack was practically empty. The other 4 poster racks were full of posters. The phone rang and the buyer said, "Marv, you did it. I don't know how you did it." He said, "But you outsold everybody. I've called them and told them to come and get their racks because they were all on a guaranteed sale. And you will be our only poster distributor in all of our stores." And I took that same rack and sold it to amusement parks. I sold it to department stores. I sold them everywhere, wherever you want. There were Marv's posters.
Important. It sounds like a very pivotal moment for you in your career that I would argue was really strategic and creative of you to do. But I don't know if I would consider that to be honest. You might argue that to be a bit borderline. And how do you think about the?
When I think back about it, it was the wrong thing to do, but I did it. It's too late now. I'm sorry, but I did it, and it helped me to become very successful.
When you think back on the moments in your career of like just foundational moments where you're like, this is big and this just happened and this changes everything, was that one of those moments?
Yes. When I was able to put that together, I realized that I had a knack for coming up with ideas that other people hadn't been doing. And just putting together this store, I had things in the store that you couldn't find in other stores. Nancy and I, every Saturday, would go to a used clothing depot. It was an operation where they don't allow people to come in and shop. They got clothing from the Salvation Army and from Goodwill, from all the different places, and they would ship them to other countries. Blue jeans, blue jean jackets, Army clothing, Navy clothing, just all kinds of crazy things. I looked at what young people would want, and I got them. And we sold tons and tons of used clothing. My best seller was band jackets. You know how a band jacket has all the buttons that are gold and all the gold things on the top and so forth? We couldn't get enough band jackets. We could buy a band jacket for $2 and sell it for $20. This clothing depot, it was like a warehouse. It was huge. It was probably a 40,000 square foot warehouse. And there would be a 24 foot wide by 24 foot deep bin full of just blue jeans. And then the next bin would be full of blue jean jackets. And the next bin would be Army shirts. The next back would be Army pants. And Nancy and I we'd go there every Saturday and just fill up a car full of $500 to $1,000 worth of used clothes and bring it to our store, and later on bring it to all stores. One store led to 2, and 2 stores led to 3, and 3 stores led to 12. We ended up being the biggest retailer and the biggest distributor of smoking paraphernalia in the Midwest part of the United States. If you owned a head shop in Missouri or Illinois or anywhere close to St. Louis, you would come to my warehouse and buy from me because I could sell you cheaper than buying from someone else. And you could get everything you wanted for your head shop at my warehouse. I had a 50,000 square foot warehouse full of posters and iron-ons and every type of smoking paraphernalia. We had jewelry, every kind of jewelry that young people would want. We had Harley Davidson. Back in those days, Harley Davidson didn't just sell to Harley stores, they would sell to anybody. And I had 2 showcases full of nothing but Harley Davidson. So anything that young people wanted, they would come to our stores to buy.
How did you stay so in the know with what young people wanted? Like how did you keep up with what people actually cared about?
Well, I had 3 children that I could see what they wanted, and I could see from our first store, it's not like you buy 100 items and 100 items sell terrific. You buy 100 items and you maybe 20 are terrific sellers, maybe 20 would be so-so, maybe 20 would be occasionally, and then maybe 20 would be bad sellers. So you get rid of the bad sellers, you get rid of the so-sos, and you just keep the best. And that's the way you merchandise, and you become good at selling your products, is to only keep the best products, try everything, and weed out the bad sellers and keep the good sellers, and make sure you got this plenty of them.
And from that, is that sort of how posters evolved to retail merchandise, evolved to like smoking paraphernalia? Was that sort of like merchandising feedback loop where you saw that people really wanted the paraphernalia side of the business over time?
When Norman Green said to me, the girls and guys that are rolling our posters want to sell to their friends, could we open up the front door and sell them posters? I immediately realized after we started selling posters, I've got young people coming in, I might as well have other things for these people. So I started bringing in all the other items that I was carrying at wholesale, and realized that I could just open up a store and get into smoking paraphernalia and get everything that I know that young people would want and become successful at it. And we were very successful at it. Yeah. And it's what really made Nancy and I wealthy people, were the headquarters stores that we had made us wealthy. And we used the money wisely, and that led to other stores. It was a great feeling to have one successful store and then have 2 or 3 more successful stores, and then to have a wholesale business that was successful, and just a wonderful feeling that we could make so much money and had a lot of happy employees. We paid them well, and they enjoyed working with the people that came in. Most of our employees were hippies, and they were working with hippies, so they had good jobs, they made good money, and it was good for everybody. It was a lot of fun.
Was there a moment where you realized you had made it, or that you had reached a level that you were trying to reach?
Well, fate showed its ugly head, and in one of our stores, it was the Ellisville City Hall decided that the city of St. Louis wanted to challenge whether we were legal. We knew we were illegal. We weren't selling marijuana. We weren't selling dope. We were selling the things that you could use with those drugs and so forth. And by the way, neither Nancy or I smoke pot. We don't take dope. We tried pot, and we both coughed like crazy. When the city of Ellisville told me that they're going to come over and arrest my manager, I said, please don't do that. Could I come to the police department and you can arrest me? And they said, sure, Marv. I said, what would be a good time? And he said, I think we could arrange it, I'll put something together. I said, good, I need about 24 hours to bring some things with me when I meet with you. And Nancy and I got in the car. We drove in a 5-mile radius of one of our stores, the Ellisville store, in a 5-mile radius. We went to gas stations and bought papers. We bought pipes. We bought papers and pipes in grocery stores. We bought papers and pipes everywhere. I had a grocery bag this big with plastic bags, each one with papers and pipes and clips and things that you use to smoke marijuana, in poly bags with the receipt of where it came from. And we went down to the ACLU office in St. Louis. They were an organization that fought for your rights. And I introduced myself, and I called them first and made an appointment with them. And they told me when to come down. I spilled the contents of this big shopping basket on their desk, and they could tell that I'd been to maybe 50 or 60 different places and bought smoking paraphernalia that you could buy anywhere. And I said, I think you've got enough proof here that you realize that this is not something that we should be arrested for.
You felt like you were being targeted.
Yes, I was being targeted. They wanted a test case in Missouri. So they said to me, we've got a lawyer that will handle your case. I said, who is it? And they said, have you ever heard of Frank Sussman? I said, Frank Sussman, that name sounds familiar. I said, that couldn't be the Frank Sussman that won the Roe versus Wade case. They said, yes, that's the same Frank Sussman. And we met Frank and his beautiful wife, Nancy. And Nancy and I became good friends with Frank and Nancy. and are still friends of theirs. Frank wrote a 2-page letter to the police department explaining that you can buy smoking paraphernalia everywhere, and sent them a picture of all the bags of smoking paraphernalia that we bought from surrounding our store. And that was the end of the case. They never pursued it. We never went to court, and we gained 2 good friends. But at that point, it was a signal to Nancy and I that we had my children working in our head shops, and perhaps maybe this isn't the best thing to do, that we should maybe get out of the head shop business and do something else, because we'd made enough money to go forward and perhaps go into the water beds that we had. Start off with 1 water bed, and by that time we had 6 to 12 water beds in every store. So we ended up closing down the head shops, and I sold the stores to friends of mine who did very well with the stores. And at that point, we decided that the waterbed business would be our next big thing. Every one of our head shops became a waterbed store, and we called it Sweet Dreams Sleep Centers. So we had 12 waterbed stores. Unfortunately, people that bought waterbeds weren't the cash buyers that bought smoking paraphernalia, because when we had the head shops, Nancy and I could accumulate a lot of cash. And when we moved into the waterbed world, we had normal people coming in suits and ties, buying waterbeds, and they either paid with a credit card or with a check. So the days of getting cash were over, but we were prepared for it and knew where to go from there.
Maybe you could explain more about, how you ran Mattress Outlet, or Sweet Dreams, I guess we're at that, and just your approach with, where you would buy, what kind of stuff.
Well, Nancy and I had the Post-Dispatch back in those days, took merchants like us and told us that if we would increase our advertising budget by 25%, they would put us on a plane and send us on a wonderful vacation each year. And we advertised to such a degree that we were able to go on trips with the Post back in those days. One trip that we took was to China, and from China we went to Taiwan and lined up waterbed manufacturers in China and in Taiwan, so that we could have an edge over our competition. We're bringing in our own stuff in containers. And being a good buyer, from all that I learned from being a buyer for grandpas, I was as good, if not better, buyer for myself, and was able to become very successful in the waterbed business. And we stayed with it for about 10 or 12 years until one day waterbeds just stopped selling.
Why did they stop selling?
There was no reason for it. I had friends in the waterbed business. I forgot to tell you, when we went to our first waterbed show, we met many waterbed merchants that we became friends with. And we went out for dinner with about 6 different waterbed people from all over, from different states in the United States. And I said to the group that we had, I said, I've got an idea. I said, I think we should make a buying group so we can buy better than everybody else. And they said, well, that sounds good. I said, okay, we're a buying group, and tomorrow we will meet at such and such a spot, and from now on, we will work the show together as a group. We'll walk into every booth and tell them we want the best price they have, and we represent 80 waterbed stores. You got one person to deal with, it's me. You give me the best deal, I'm gonna shop your competition, and whoever comes out on top for the best prices on the best products will get our business. And that's one of the main reasons that we were very, very successful in the waterbed business. When waterbeds stopped selling, we got out of the mall, both malls, and turned our mattress stores into sleep centers. By that time, when waterbeds died, we needed something else. We had all these stores, and in many cases, I decided that I hated to pay rent, so I bought the buildings.
From the moment where you were filling up people's cars with gas and fixing them, selling posters, buying, selling, wholesaling, it just seems like you've pivoted so much. Like you've been able to sort of turn and pivot and juke and continue to survive, whether that be different trends of clothing or different buying habits of people or enduring challenges from the police in the area. Like, how were you able to continue to survive being a business owner through many decades?
Well, first of all, a Rotenberg never gives up, number one. And number two is a Rotenberg never gives up. And number three is a Rotenberg never gives up. So you just keep fighting. If you're fighting and you're winning the fight, and finally at the end you're losing the fight, you get out of the fight and go to the next fight. So that's what we did. We pivoted from head shop to water beds to mattresses. And when we went to mattresses, we went to furniture. We had leather galleries. I opened up the first leather galleries in St. Louis. I bought a building in St. Charles, a 46,000 square foot building that was a regulation ice skating rink, and they built onto it a regulation roller skating rink. So I bought this huge piece of property that was about 30 years ago.
Was that your biggest acquisition? How much did you get that for?
I paid $350,000 for the building. It was empty. The guy that had it became an alcoholic and lost all of his money and lost the building, and it went to the bank, and I was able to buy it from the bank for $350,000. 5,000 square feet of mattresses would be enough. So you got 40,000 extra square feet. So what do you do with it? You immediately go into the furniture business.
Going back to that time when St. Charles was like at its peak, how many people per day on a Saturday, for example, would go into that store to buy because no one could go online and purchase a mattress. They had to go to the store with their spouse, walk through it. How many, like at the pinnacle or the peak of St. Charles, how many people roughly were going in the store, and how many sales reps did you have?
We probably had between 10 and 15 salespeople, because we're open 7 days a week from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night.
Wow.
Back in those days. And we had the biggest display of mattresses in St. Louis. We had a furniture store as big as any furniture store in town. And we were doing a tremendous amount of business. It was great. It was terrific. This is before you could buy things online.
Yeah.
You had to, in person, go to buy something. It was wonderful. It was a ball. It was so much fun going to furniture stores. Nancy and I were young people. We could walk from 8 o'clock in the morning till the show would close at 5 o'clock, and then they'd have a big cocktail party every day at these shows. The best shows, by the way, were when they opened up the furniture shows in Las Vegas. I loved that. Nancy loved it. My people loved going to Las Vegas. I love to gamble. I think I'm a good card player. I have had a lot of fun gambling. And I love Vegas. I've gambled all over the United States and in foreign countries because I've been at shows and been on trips, and wherever there was a casino, wherever I was and there was a casino, I'd have to try it out.
What do you like to play?
I like to play 3-card stud. It's my favorite game.
What was the most biggest win that you
On an island in Nassau, I had one night that I won a little over $12,000 that night.
Wow.
I've had other nights with $8,000 and $10,000 wins. I've had my losses. If I had to add it up, how much I've lost compared to how much I've won, I've lost more than I won. So I can't tell you that I'm a card counter and I could sit at a blackjack table and walk away with $500,000, because that's not the way I play cards. After meeting Nancy and meeting her family,
What's her family like?
oh boy. Nancy's mom and dad were terrific people. They were fun. They were good Christian people that loved each other, loved their family. It was Nancy and her 2 sisters, Mary and Kathy, and her 2 brothers, John and Jim. John and Jim and Kathy are still in our lives. Since I've lost every one of my friends, this is a very hard thing to do. I had 15 friends that I was close to, and we used to meet every Sunday for brunch at a deli, and the last one died about 3 months ago. All of my friends have died here in St. Louis. I have all of Nancy's relatives that are still alive, and her brother Jim is now my best friend. I have grandsons that are like sons to me. That they're not just friends, but I feel like they're my sons. And you're one of them, and you're another one. And I'm so blessed. God has been so good to me. I don't know why. I don't know why I deserve to have 2 wonderful marriages, 2 wonderful families, two lives that bring me to be 90 years of age. And I walked over and sat down in this chair. I'm going to get up and walk away and eat dinner and have a Diet Coke, and I may put a little bit of rum in it, and it'll be a big celebration for me. But marrying Nancy, who is the love of my life, was the best thing that ever happened to me. From the minute I met her, she has been my best friend, my buddy, my lover, the best mother. I can't say, I could talk to you for 2 hours about how much I love her and how good she has been to me. I wouldn't be sitting here probably without her help. We've traveled the world hunting. We've been to Alaska together. We killed that moose together up there. If there's anyone here that doesn't understand hunting, after we're finished talking on this tape, please come to me and let me explain to you why we kill old male animals. And I hope to be able to get you to understand what hunting's all about. And like the guy said when we killed that moose in Alaska, the next morning when we killed about a 900-pound moose, there were 12 hunters hunting at this camp, and I gave all of the meat. The only thing I kept of the moose was the skin and the horns and one piece of tenderloin that I put in the little, we were driving a Toyota camper that we hunted out of, and I kept a tenderloin to cook from the moose. But otherwise, like the guide said to me, Marv, you're thanking me for helping you to get the meat off of this skin of the head of this moose. He said, and I'm thanking you because you fed 5 families hundreds of pounds of meat. And he said, that was wonderful. He said, without you, I don't know what these families would have done. And I'm saying to all of my family here that every time we killed an animal, someone ate that meat. And we made sure, like in Alaska, that the meat went to poor children's homes and places like that. We fed so many people with the meat from these animals that I'm very proud and happy of that. It's a wonderful sport.
A lion that's towering over you, since that's been in the video. Can you tell us the story of the lion?
Yes. I was hunting in Africa my first time, and in Africa there what we call game ranches. They range in size from 5,000 acres to 30,000 acres. And the one I was hunting on didn't have lions to hunt. It had many other animals to hunt. On the land next to his was another rancher, and the rancher didn't have any hunters. And he called my rancher and he said, there's a lion that got over the 18-foot fence with barbed wire on the top.
18 feet.
He climbed up 18 foot and got over the barbed wire, and he was killing animals. Every week he was eating another animal in this guy's ranch next door. I wish I could tell you that I killed a man-eater to save people's lives, but he wasn't a man-eater. He was killing animals, and this guy called and said, can someone come over here and kill this lion? And he gave me a terrific deal to kill the lion at a price that was so low that I couldn't resist it. So I went the next day. We took our truck with our guides and our blacks that cut up the animals after we kill them, and went to hunt there. And within about an hour and a half, we located the lion, and we tracked him, and I got in position for a good shot, and I took one heart-lung shot, which what you do is you hit the animal in their shoulder, and you're taking out that leg, and the shoulder, the bullet goes through their chest and into their lung and then into their heart. So when you place the right shot on an animal, it only takes one bullet to put down the meanest, toughest animals in the world. And the lion took one shot and he was down. And we told the guys that were cutting this animal up that we were going to mount him full. So it took them hours to get the coat off of this lion perfectly so that it could be brought back to the United States, where they take a plastic farm for a lion and they put the skin, they attach it to the farm and mount it. It took hours and hours for the taxidermist to do that.
Where has that lion been sitting for the past?
He's been in my office till about a month ago, when I finally convinced Nancy that it was time for the lion to come home. We're trying to sell our building, and I've got a few more animals there, about 12 of them, that I'd like to find a home for once we sell the building.
How do you think it felt for an employee walking into your office with a lion behind you?
The lion was famous in St. Charles. We had salespeople on the floor after they had finished their sales. In a lot of cases, if the guy looked like he might be a hunter, they would ask the gentleman, do you hunt? If he said yes, they'd say, what do you hunt? Do you hunt big game? And if he said yes, would you like to see our boss's lion? And they said, oh, of course. And they'd walk into my office with these customers, and if they had a child with them, I would put the child up on the lion's back, and they'd take pictures of their children sitting on the back of the lion. And I had people drive with friends as far as 80 to 100 miles away just to come and see my lion. Just loved it.
Wow.
And I have a bunch of other really great trophies in my office.
How much do you think that line is worth today?
If you went to hunt a lion today, it would cost you about $50,000 if you could get a hunt. Back in the day when I killed this lion, I paid $1,100 to kill the lion, and a lion hunt in those days was $25,000. So here's Marv, always looking for a deal. And my good friend that I was hunting with there was a taxidermist. He said, Marv, you go kill that lion. He said, because I know you're too cheap to pay $25,000 to hunt a lion. Go over there and get that lion. He said, I'll mount them for you standing on a rock. I said, how much you gonna charge me? He said, you know that $3,000 bedroom set I've been looking at? I said, yeah. He said, I'll trade you for that $3,000 bedroom set, which I paid about $800 for.
Wow.
So it's an expensive lion, and today they sell for about $15,000 to $20,000. If he had a better mane on him, like the MGM lion has a better mane, a lion with a better mane would probably sell for about $50,000 to $100,000 today.
Who did you admire when you were a kid? Who did you look up to?
I looked up to my father, who was a very sharp man, but powerful. Honest Joe Rotenberg. The merchants on Washington Avenue, when he bought the store in Collinsville, in East St. Louis, Illinois, he needed $30,000. He had saved $12,000. He went to each of the merchants on Washington Avenue and asked them to lend him the money so he could buy the store, and told them that he would be buying from them because they were all wholesalers. He brought a piece of paper that was printed. He had it printed, and it was a note, a promissory note. None of the people that lent him money would take the piece of paper. They just looked him in the eye and they said, Joe, all we need is your handshake that you're gonna pay us back. And my dad borrowed the money to open his store on a handshake and the $12,000 that he had saved up. And I'm so proud of him.
What was the most difficult business decision you've had to make?
Breaking up with Norman Green. I made Norman Green an equal partner in our business. Norman was a good paper guy. He was good of getting things done, but I was the decision maker. I was the guy that came up with the ideas. I'm the guy that bought everything. And Norman, I'd give him the jobs and he would handle them. And he was a wonderful guy. He died a couple of years ago. And when we broke up, I gave him 50% of the business. He received 50% all the time we were in business, even though Nancy and I did most of the work, and we were the people that made the business a success.
Have you accomplished more or less than what you expected of yourself when you were a kid?
100 times more than I expected. I never even dreamed of being as successful as Nancy and I are. When you say me, I consider me and Nancy, we're a team. We've done everything together from the day I met her. Everything that we've done has been together. We're like this. You can't pull us apart. And you give us a job, we'll get it done better than anybody else.
How do you make friendships last through time so well? How do you keep friends over a long period of time?
Just being a good person and being honest and helping. I help anybody that I see in trouble, whether it's a family or friend, it doesn't make any difference, or a stranger that I'd see. If a guy's boat is dead, I'm right there in 2 minutes with a rope to pull his boat back to his house or to his dock or to a place to get it repaired. In a lot of cases, being a mechanic, I can repair a guy's boat. I've been at the Lake of the Ozarks. We haven't talked about our houses at the lake. I've had houses at the lake and boats for 53 years. I love the Lake of the Ozarks. I love boating and fast boats. And I just want to help people. I want to help my children. I want to help my grandchildren. I want to help my great-grandchildren, which you are the father of one that's a week old now, and he's in the other room.
Speaking of children, what qualities from yourself do you see most in your children?
They're all hardworking. They all believe in God. Some more than others. I'm so lucky that they're all successful. They have wonderful children, and their children have children. I'm so lucky to have all these things in my life. God has been so good to me. I didn't even think about God until about 10 years ago when I had open heart surgery. I found God, and I started praying to God because I didn't want to die. I wanted to keep living, and God came through. I had a successful aortic valve put in me, and of course, I've had my illnesses. I've got many illnesses as we speak that I'm dealing with, but God has taken care of me. I don't want to make this a religious speech, but I wish I would have found God before I needed my heart operation. I think we would have been a lot closer, a lot earlier in my life. I just took God for granted that God was up there and he would take care of me and just be a good person. And that's all God really wanted from me.
What's your relationship with God like now?
I go to sleep and I pray. I pray for my family. I pray for friends. I pray for my relatives. I pray for anyone that I've touched. And I pray to wake up tomorrow morning and to be able to get out of my bed and walk into the bathroom and do my duty and make a great cup of coffee and some breakfast and maybe make a few bucks in the stock market.
Last question. What do you want to be remembered by?
I want people to remember me as a funny, good, generous, and the best friend that they could ever have. God bless America, and God bless all the people that hear my speech, that I love them all. Thank you, God, for giving us a wonderful place to live and enjoy. Amen.
Happy 90th.
Here, take this shotgun.
Come out real quick.
Thanks to my crew.